Hello, I'm Bill Monroe, and welcome to episode 71 of 2-Minute Talk Tips. This week's tip, when on a webinar, zoom in with your webcam. Virtual presentations are becoming a lot more common. Often we're asked to go ahead and present on a topic or teach a class when we're not even in the same room as our learners. There are a lot of reasons for this. First of all, it's cheaper. You don't actually have to go ahead and travel out to the location to do the presentation. It's easier to schedule because you don't have to allow nearly as much travel time. As more and more employees are working remotely and working from home or from other locations, it becomes more important to conduct those presentations via webcams and webinar-type software. Of course, these presentations do have some unique challenges, and I talked a lot more about those challenges in episode 14, where I shared 12 different tips for making your webinars more effective. And you can find that at 2minutetalktips.com/webinar tips. This week, I want to encourage you to zoom in on your face with your webcam. Now, I know that might seem uncomfortable at first, but there are a lot of great reasons to do this. First of all, if you get tighter on your face, you minimize visual distraction. What that means is you're the only thing the audience is going to be looking at. They're not going to be able to see nearly as much of the other stuff that's in your office. This also makes it easier for the camera to focus on you and for the various meters to get the appropriate light setting in the camera, so you're not alternately getting washed out and then put into shadows. Now, you might think that being tied in on the camera frame would make you even more nervous, and maybe that's true, but the other advantage, though, is that your audience can't see you fidgeting around with your hands, because all of that is, again, out of frame. Zooming in tighter means that the audience is going to be focusing on you, and that's what you want them focusing on. But you should probably still wear pants. Stick around, and after the break, we're going to talk about a book I just read, TED Talks, the official TED Guide to Public Speaking. Welcome back. I figured something out a few weeks ago that I probably should have figured out, a few years ago. Namely, that the Seattle Public Library has Kindle books for rental, and you can just set it up so that you can download a Kindle book to your Amazon Kindle device for 3 weeks from the Seattle Library. It gives me a great opportunity to read more books and to read those books without having to pay out of pocket for them. One of those books I just gave my 3 weeks to was TED Talks, the official TED Guide to Public Speaking by Chris Anderson. I actually really enjoyed this book. It's interesting because Chris Anderson owns the TED organization, dedicated to talks about technology, education, and design, with a focus on ideas that are worth sharing. I talked a lot more about TED back in episode 5, where I talked about another book that I had read. And you can go back and find that episode at 2minutetalktips.com/talkliketed. The thing about the TED Talk is that it's sort of become the gold standard for speakers. It's an 18-minute talk in front of a very large group of folks who have paid a lot of money to be at that conference and hear a whole bunch of talks. It's all about helping folks think about new things that may be outside their core area of expertise. So a lot of people talk about how important it is to give a TED Talk and how impressive it is. Like I said, it's become the gold standard. Some, of course, would say that it shouldn't be. I'm a little more generous on that. I think that the TED Talk format is incredibly valuable in certain contexts and for what it does. But of course, different speaking styles and timings and structures will be appropriate in a wide variety of different situations. Still, a lot of the stuff that Chris Anderson talks about in this book is just really good things to keep in mind for public speaking in general. So even if you are not booking your ticket to the TED conference already to conduct your presentation, there's still a lot to learn from TED Talks, the official TED Guide to Public Speaking. So over the next few minutes, I want to take a look at about 10 different passages from the book and talk about how they're helpful and what I found valuable in them. The first one is, the only thing that truly matters in public speaking is not confidence, stage presence, or smooth talking. It's having something worth saying. What I like about this talk is that it's the core message of what you're talking about that should matter. And I talk about the core message a lot. You've got to figure out what your goal is. Why are you talking to this audience? What do you want to accomplish? What is going to be your call to action? What result do you want to have happen as a result of having given this talk? And if you don't have that, if you don't have a goal, if you don't have something worth saying, then there's really no point to be doing that talk. You're just wasting your time and you're wasting everybody else's time. Focus on your message above all else. And of course, that's also the advice we generally give to speakers who are anxious. Remember, it's not about you. It's not about the speaker. It's about the message that you want to share and that you want to convey. That's where the value of the experience is. Number 2, they say, in fact, the same question you ask as you do your research can help provide the blueprint for your talk. What are the issues that matter most? How are they related? How can they be easily explained? What are the riddles that people don't yet have good answers for? What are the key controversies? You can use your own journey of discovery to suggest your talk's key moments of revelation. You see, once you have your goal in mind, and once you've decided what the result is that you want, a large part of the prep work and authoring work of a presentation is figuring out how you're going to talk about that. And asking questions like these become a really great way to go ahead and figure that out. If you're asking these questions about your topic, then probably your audience is going to be asking these questions as well. And if you can provide those answers, well, now you've got a structure for your talk. As you build it along the things that you needed to learn to more effectively convey your point, now you have even a skeleton that you can use sometimes to go ahead and build the rest of the talk. So if you're at a complete loss for how to structure your talk, go back and think about how you explored the ideas and the concepts behind the topic you wanted to discuss. And that will give you the structure you need. Next passage. So language works its magic only to the extent that it is shared by speaker and listener. And there's the key clue to how to achieve the miracle of recreating your idea in someone else's brain. You can only use the tools that your audience has access to. If you start only with your language, your concepts, your assumptions, your values, you will fail. So instead, start with theirs. It's only from that common ground that they can begin to build your idea inside their minds. One of the most important things for any speaker to do as they prepare their talk is to focus on their audience analysis, to understand what the audience knows and what the audience feels about a topic as much as possible. In general, most folks caution against using jargon or very specific language when presenting. I think there's a little more wiggle room in that, though. If you're talking to an audience where it is reasonable to assume that everybody in that audience knows those terms and lives and talks like that all the time, then using that jargon appropriately can be a nice shortcut to conveying messages to your audience. But ultimately, you do want to convey your message and you want to convey those ideas and actually go ahead and recreate those ideas in your audience's minds. Communications 101 is that communication is the process by which shared meaning is created. Now, you can say that your terms and your language and your vocabulary are the right ones, and your audience is wrong for not knowing them, but that doesn't matter. Because if your audience doesn't know them, you can't create that shared meaning between them and you. You have to meet your audience where it's at. Next passage says, "We all suffer from a cognitive bias for which economist Robin Hogarth coined the term the curse of knowledge. In a nutshell, we find it hard to remember what it feels like not to know something that we ourselves know well. A physicist lives and breathes subatomic particles and may assume that everyone else, of course, knows what the charm quark is. I was shocked in a recent cocktail party discussion to hear a talented young novelist ask, 'You keep using the term natural selection. What exactly do you mean by that?' I thought everyone with half an education understood the basic ideas of evolution. I was wrong." You see, this is an important caution that goes along with the previous passage we talked about. Just because something is painfully obvious to us as the expert on the topic does not mean it is nearly that obvious to our audience. If it was as obvious to them, then they would also be the experts on the topic, and you probably wouldn't be speaking to them about this topic. When you're speaking and it's your job to go ahead and share information and to provide a new idea and to provide a new context, you have to remember that everything that you know and everything that you think is so simple is not so simple to them. And it's not because they're dumb. It's just because they live in a different context than you do. And if you want to communicate with them, you need to be able to meet your audience in your audience's context. You can say they should come to you, but ultimately, you're not going to get the result you want if that's the position you take. So go back to the basics. Assume you're going to have to talk about some of the really basic stuff, the really simple stuff, in order to sell your big idea. Next passage. "And for every speaker, the following is true. Having no slides at all is better than bad slides." I like this because it's a really simple thought that really conveys what matters. And something that I talk about a lot is that slides are there to support you. And if a slide is illegible or if the audience can't understand the slide, get rid of it because it offers you no value. All it does is distract from the message you are trying to convey. It distracts from the story you are trying to tell. It distracts from the information you are trying to impart. And if it's just making it harder for you to be successful, get rid of it. Bad slides interfere with you as the speaker. Don't put up with them. Next passage. "Sometimes a speaker will hit the audience with a slide of immense complexity. Perhaps he is unconsciously trying to impress with the sheer scope and nuance of his work. As he continues churning out words, the audience is desperately scanning the slide, trying to figure out how to match what is being said with what they are looking at." This aligns with that previous passage as well. Here's the thing. We run into this a lot, actually. We'll go ahead and prepare our presentation. We'll submit a slide deck for review, and maybe there's 35 slides for a 25-minute presentation slot, and somebody will come back and say, "That's too many slides, cut them." It's possible it's too many slides, but there's really no way to tell. The fact of the matter is you can't let the length of a presentation in time dictate the number of slides in that slide deck. You want your slides simple and clean. If somebody wants to impose a maximum slide count, and you reach that by simply consolidating multiple slides into individual slides instead of cutting out big chunks of content, then all you've done is create more illegible slides, and that is not going to help you succeed in your presentation. There are times you can go ahead and structure a slide deck such that you are going through slides every 10 to 15 seconds, and that is helping to provide further clarity. Now, adding multiple slides and going to more and more slides is not a license to go ahead and put more and more content and material into your presentation. You want to use the number of slides you need to go ahead and convey the information you need to convey in your presentation. And if there's too much, you need to cut material, not just cut slides. The next passage says, "But it is important to distinguish unscripted from unprepared. In an important talk, there's no excuse for the latter. Many unscripted talks, alas, result in half-baked explanations, non sequiturs, key elements missed, and rambling overruns." This is one of those things that's really important as well, because we often think, I don't want to practice too much because I don't want to seem too scripted, or I want to seem natural up there. I don't want to have to go ahead and memorize everything and just regurgitate it. You see, and that, in theory, is a reasonable position for some speakers. The problem is it's used as an excuse to not prepare and practice at all. Just because you don't have a manuscript that you are committing to memory and going through word for word doesn't mean you don't prepare. You still have to prepare. You still have to practice. You still have to make sure that what you want to say will fit in with the context of how you want to say it, and that you are comfortable going ahead and saying that. Whether you work from a brief outline, a detailed outline, a full manuscript, or whatever, it's always important to go ahead and prepare and practice and rehearse. Whichever format you use to create your presentation materials, go ahead and work through that and make sure that you are prepared when you hit that stage. The next passage says, "Adrenaline is great for powering a sprint to safety across the savannah, and it can certainly bring energy and excitement to your stage presence, but too much of it is a bad thing. It can dry up your mouth and tighten your throat. Its job is to turbocharge your muscles, and if your muscles are not being used, the adrenaline rush may start them twitching, hence the shaking associated with an extreme case of nerves." A lot of speakers who may be nervous and very scared about speaking are having an adrenaline rush. They are going through a full-on fight or flight scenario, and you can't really do either of those from the stage. You're expecting to be cornered and attacked physically, or you're expecting to make a quick escape. Neither of those is conducive to an effective presentation. But it's something that's very primal, and we have those chemicals coursing through us that make our muscles want to start doing things. And that's why you'll see many speakers before a big presentation. Maybe they'll start doing jumping jacks, or maybe they'll start pacing extensively. It's to burn off some of that adrenaline. It's to burn off some of that excess energy so that it doesn't consume you and doesn't defeat you before you get on stage. And then you can go ahead and hit the stage and be able to funnel your energy into the powerful and effective presentation that you want to conduct. The thing is, the adrenaline is not just being nerves in your head. It is a biological, physical response to your anxiety and to your nerves. Burn off some of that energy physically. Remember that your presentation is about your message. It's not about you, and be ready to hit the stage. And that brings us to the final passage I want to talk about. Focus on what you're talking about. Monica's suggestion to write "This matters" on your notes is wonderful. This is the single biggest piece of advice I can give you. It's not about you. It's about the idea you're passionate about. Your job is to be there in service of that idea, to offer it as a gift. If you can hold that in your mind as you walk on the stage, you'll find it liberating. Because ultimately that's what matters. It's the point. It's the story you're telling. It's the goal you want to achieve. That's what matters. The talk is not about you. It's about what you want to have happen. Focus on that, and it's a great way to manage the nerves that are often associated with public speaking. So what are your thoughts on these concepts and these tips? Go ahead and let us know over at 2minutetalktips.com/TEDTalksBook. Be sure to pick up a copy of the book at your favorite bookstore, online retailer, or your local library and read it. I'd love to know your thoughts, so go ahead and share them here as well at 2minutetalktips.com/TEDTalksBook. I've been starting to play around with Facebook Live as an informal tool. Look for Strokecast on Facebook and let me know what you think of that. It's one of the reasons why I've been talking about the web camera today. Which brings us to the next thing, and that's on your next webinar, zoom in tighter with your video camera. And of course, as always, don't get best, get better. Thanks a lot. I'm Bill Monroe, and I'll talk to you next week.
Two-Minute Talk Tips is a proud production of the Currently Speaking Podcast Network.